Hello, welcome to Ray Recommends. My name is Ray Wenachibus. I'm here with the original Batman himself, Mr. Anthony Anaxagorou. He is the co-creator of Outspoken and also a publishing house called Outspoken Press. Today we're going to talk about race, identity, politics in the UK. Both me and Anthony use our poetry to campaign, to educate. We both go into schools and we're both ambiguous. Like, we both often asked where we are from. Anthony, where are you from?
I was born by the river in a little tent. I was born in London, but my family are Cypriot by heritage.
Okay, cool. I was also born in London. My dad's Jamaican, Rasta, and my mum is an English woman. What do you think that these kind of things, do they matter to other people so much, or is it just us?
I think that we live in a very hyper-racialised society. So I think that when you inherit a system that is fixated on race and identity, you begin to try and understand where you come from. And I think that understanding helps to inform your own values, your own regard of not only the world, but for other people and for each other. So I think that the idea of race and the purpose that it serves is obviously biologically fictional, but I think that for the individual itself, I've always struggled with trying to understand where I fit in.
It's interesting because, like, being mixed race as well. Growing up around Hackney, I see that most of my friends were mixed race. Most of them had white English mothers and Jamaican or African dads. We had like a whole mixed race crew, and I was the only person in that crew who didn't look like, I guess, more
quintessentially mixed race.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that kind of, even though biologically we are of a similar
mixed heritage, yeah.
Yeah, heritage. Like, I'm mixed heritage, and I still felt like I had something to prove within that space, purely because of my features. Like, I never said I was black. I said I was mixed race.
Yeah.
Yet I have to prove that I'm black.
There's two issues at play, and one is how do people self-identify, and the other one is how are you viewed by wider society. And you know, one of the dominant arguments is that if you look white to the dominant group, which is white people, then you are technically white, irrespective of where you come from. So if I'm walking down the street and a white person views me as being white as well, and the way they treat me and the privileges that are afforded to me are the same as white people, then technically you could argue that you are a white person. Even if you do come from North Africa, even if you come from North India, even if you are mixed race, you still benefit from whiteness. My contention is that, from a personal perspective, I've never been called white by white people. And I've never felt white since I was very young, whatever that means. And that was like a big exploration to try and work out what whiteness is, from not just like a kind of physical perspective, but from a philosophical one as well. These were all things that I was forced to have to examine from young, because the kids at school would never refer to me as a white kid. So, and the people that did call me white were black.
Yeah.
So this was, I'm saying, like, you're growing up, and I guess you might have had the same kind of thing. You grow up with this schizophrenic, mixed idea of who you are, and that's what forces you to want to kind of delve into this idea of identity.
We've also been to places like Ireland, where there's another kind of racial tension there, and then even though I guess we would both look at them and be like, oh, they're all white, but they're all fighting each other, you know. And then even when I was in South Africa and Kenya, and I saw the racism that was happening there throughout different tribes, throughout people who even biologically come from similar roots and backgrounds, but then they've kind of come forward into this part of history where there's a war. And I see, seeing all of those kind of conflicts, I don't know, like, they deeply interested me even more, because it kind of complicated even more the idea of race and belonging. Yeah,
yeah, I think that definitely. I mean, you know, the Irish complex is definitely and the conflicts that have happened between the Irish, the Scottish, the Welsh, and the English are definitely interesting. And it is racism, like the idea of holding a system of persecution simply because of a person's race, definitely falls and qualifies as being systematic racism. But I think the difference is you need to look at if the oppressor are, you know, white Europeans, or in this case the English, how likely, what's the likeliness of being able to assimilate? And if you look at the history of racism in the last maybe 200 years, especially in America, one of the benefits that was afforded to the Italians, to the Spanish, to the Irish, to the Dutch, was the ability to assimilate and to lose their otherness and claim whiteness. And that was the kind of unifying factor that enabled white supremacy as a political construct to take hold of people's imagination. Whereas Native Americans, African Americans, Hispanics, they didn't have that luxury, because you can't alter your physiognomy or the colour of your skin. So that was one of the ways in which they were kept constantly oppressed. Whereas other groups of white Europeans have been able to work their way up the social ladder and gain and gain security and be able to self-determine, whilst other groups of people have constantly been kept marginalised and oppressed. And that's part of white supremacy's kind of proponents. That's what it's designed to do. And again, with the Irish, like you say, there has definitely been that conflict there, but their whiteness has allowed them, in a sense, to climb that social ladder and to reap the benefits of white supremacy, because they are white people, irrespective of the conflict they have with the English.
And then haven't we in some way benefited from white supremacy?
Yeah, but the thing is, it's all relative. I mean, if you compare me and you to someone from Nigeria, then we will definitely benefit from white supremacy because of the fact that we are closer to the dominant aesthetic. But then if you compare us to a Scotsman or to someone from Scotland, then we are less likely to benefit. So that's what I'm saying. It all depends. It depends on who you can compare it to, and it's important to be aware of your privilege and to understand where you fit in the construct of race. And you know, when people have said, you know, we've had discussions before, and I will absolutely admit that you benefit from male supremacy, and you can benefit from white supremacy up to an extent.
Can I bring up Dappy?
Yeah, if you want.
The whole thing with Dappy, like, we both looked at that and we were both like, wow, this guy is confused. But then for me, it even made me think, well, actually, how many opportunities has this guy had to question his race, his background, where he belongs, where he sits? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. The issue with Dappy was interesting. Obviously, like, he was completely wrong to use the N-word in his song. I don't think anyone should be using it, to be honest. But then, for a non-black person, I don't have the right to dictate how black people deal with the black experience in a white supremacist system. So I don't feel I'm fully qualified to say that. But I think that the word is highly detrimental to everyone. I think that with Dappy, he obviously didn't understand what he was doing, and he has a lack of historical perspective that's able to put the word into context. For him, he obviously saw it as, I'm entitled to say this because I regard myself as other. And when he said we're reclaiming the word, again, there was kind of that lended itself to this kind of transracial idea. I think it's a confusion. I think it's not being able to place yourself.
What is the role, do you think, of poetry in British politics today? Because I think that, you know, we've spoken a lot about I know the paradigms of other parts of the world, but if we just come back and kind of look directly at the country that we're living in, how does poetry give you the tool to go into a political space?
I think what poetry does very successfully is that it's able to communicate to that part of the human spirit that sits between the academic and the intellectual and the didactic. So I think that within that there's a grey area, and it's kind of like the spiritual realm of the human being. And what poetry does is, because of its mechanisms, its seduction, its language, its eloquence and its nuance, it's able to talk and communicate to that very abstract part of the human mind. So I think that the benefits of being able to articulate very tenuous, very dense, political, controversial matters through a grandiloquence, what that does is that it encourages people to not be as defensive with regards to the way in which they're going to respond to something. And it softens that blow, which, you know, if you get a lot of academic work, it's very rhetorical, it's point driven, it has an agenda. Same with poetry.
Yeah.
But I think the language helps soften that, so you don't feel that you're being necessarily preached to, or you don't feel that someone, they're not proselytizing, they're not trying to convince you of something, although they are. But it's very subtle. It's subtle and it's manipulative. And I think that's the difference, is that poetry is manipulative in the sense of how it uses language to kind of coax someone in, as opposed to just grabbing them from the collar and
yeah. Poetry is often used as propaganda.
Yeah, exactly. And there has always been that link between propagandists and poets that are essentially in sound bites. The idea of being able to have a sound bite that is short, that is captivating, that is articulate, and that people can reuse.
What's brought me closer to politics, I'd say, is going into teaching and teaching poetry, because of course you need something to say.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like when I'm in a classroom, I'm interested in what my students have to say, and a lot of those things that they have to say are kind of political frustrations. You kind of, because you teach as well, but you kind of do that more, I don't know if I want to say more consciously within your own poetry. Like, if you were running for Parliament, which, I don't know, is that something that you would do?
No.
Why not?
Because I'm not a politician. I'm not a strict orthodox politician in that sense. Obviously, like, we're all political beings.
Yeah.
You know, whether we understand that or not, we're all part of a system, and we adhere to a system that makes us politically active. But I think the difference with me is I feel like a poet. I don't feel like a politician. Sure, you want to change policy. Sure, you want your views to be shared. You want your views to be implemented. But then at the same time, I think that politics is a completely different industry, a completely different arena that isn't for me. I write what I see, I'm responding to things, and the idea that, you need poets, you need social commentators, you need analysts, you need people who are able to use language in a way that is accessible but is also informative. And I think that politicians, they have very strict restrictions with what they can. I mean, look at Corbyn, and you can see how one person's view is not necessarily what is going to be implemented throughout a party. So it's not just kind of clear cut, whereas like, this is what I think and this is what is going to happen. It's not that binary. Like, it is very, very complicated. And I think that poets, and like I say, commentators, writers, analysts, journalists are just as necessary as policymakers, because these are the people that inform the public. They're able to articulate in an alternative way. And these poems, they last forever. You think of, Adrian Mitchell's Tell Me Lies About Vietnam. That poem has been going for a very long time, and it is still very, very relevant.
But then, like, because we both run poetry nights, so when Shilpa, you run Outspoken, and something that some people have kind of criticised, I guess, political poetry for is, you're just preaching to the converted. Like, how do you create a space where not everyone in the audience or not everyone watching you already 100% agrees with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's complete rubbish. I don't think we're preaching to converted at all. I think it depends on the context of where the poem is happening. I think that at poetry nights, people have consciously and willingly gone to a night. So that is a decision that they have made because they, one, have an interest in poetry, in language, or in the people, in the poets that are performing.
Yeah.
Whereas on YouTube, which is kind of like a massive kind of like amoral bedlam, it is completely different. And I have been criticised very, very harshly, crushingly on YouTube, being called things like
I read those comments, man.
Right, social justice warrior. This man is a socialist. When somebody called me
you've been called worse, man.
Yeah,
I've seen worse.
I mean, not for the sake of the video. We need to keep it clean. But, there's been a lot of backlash, and I'm absolutely fine with that. I don't expect, when you're pushing across an opinion or you have a staunch set of principles, I don't expect people to agree. In fact, if you look at wider society, and you look at the national consciousness of the UK, it's massively conservative. And if you are pushing across liberal, socialist, kind of more plural ideas, people aren't going to be happy with that. So you know, it's an occupational hazard. It's what comes with the territory.
Speaking of trolling and abuse, where can people find you on Twitter?
There's a Twitter handle, Anthony1983.
When's the next Outspoken?
Last Tuesday of January. There's a Outspoken Bites, which is an open mic, which is the 14th of January at the library in Covent Garden, and then the next Outspoken is on Tuesday, the 26th of January at the Forge in Camden.
Great. Get down, check out Anthony Anaxagorou, check out Outspoken Press and Outspoken Poetry Night. Ray recommends.
Cheers.